Picture an empty field, grass, a few fences, maybe some grazing animals, and absolutely nothing that suggests 200,000 people will be standing on it in 6 weeks. That's the strange reality at the heart of every major music festival on Earth. Somewhere between an open pasture and the opening act, an entire temporary city has to materialize out of nothing, function flawlessly for a handful of days, and then disappear almost as quickly as it arrived. It's one of the strangest logistics challenges in the world, and almost nobody who attends ever stops to think about it. Let's start with the land itself. Most large festivals don't own purpose-built venues. They borrow farmland, fairgrounds, or rural estates for a few weeks a year, which means the very first job isn't booking bands. It's negotiating land use. Long before a single ticket goes on sale, organizers are signing agreements with landowners, surveying soil conditions, mapping drainage, and figuring out where the ground can support heavy vehicles and where it will turn into a swamp the moment it rains. Because rain is not a hypothetical for outdoor festivals. It's an annual certainty somewhere on the calendar, and an entire field can go from solid to unusable in a matter of hours. Once a site is secured, the access problem comes first. Rural land rarely has roads designed for tens of thousands of cars, buses, and semi-trucks. Existing farm tracks and country lanes get reinforced with temporary trackway, essentially interlocking metal or composite plates that spread the weight of heavy vehicles across soft ground so it doesn't get torn apart by mud. Bridges that were built decades ago to handle a tractor now need to handle convoys of 18-wheelers hauling staging equipment. So engineers either reinforce them temporarily or reroute traffic around them entirely. All of this happens before a single tent goes up, because nothing else can move onto the site until the site can actually be reached. With access solved, the build begins, and it begins with people, not stages. Construction crews need somewhere to live for weeks at a time, so the first structures raised are usually staff facilities, toilets, showers, sleeping quarters, a canteen serving hot meals, and often a welfare tent offering basic medical and mental health support. It sounds almost backwards. Before a single guitar amp is delivered, festival organizers are essentially building a small construction worker town. But it makes sense once you consider the scale. Some festivals will have over 1,000 contractors on-site simultaneously during peak build weeks, erecting dozens of major structures ranging from massive tents to multi-story stage rigging. Most of that actual labor isn't done by the festival's own staff. A festival's core team functions more like a general contractor on a building project. They don't pour the concrete. They coordinate the people who do. Lighting riggers, stage engineers, fencing companies, sound technicians, tent erectors, plumbers, electricians. Dozens of specialized subcontractors converge on the same patch of land, each working to a master schedule that has to account for the fact that some structures need to go up before others. You can't wire the lighting truss before the truss itself exists, and you can't deliver the truss before the access roads can bear its weight. Sequencing this correctly, across weeks of work and often unpredictable weather, is one of the quieter miracles of festival production. Then there's sanitation, which sounds unglamorous until you do the math. A festival hosting 100,000 or more attendees over several days generates an enormous volume of human waste, and there is simply no way to truck in enough portable toilets and service them constantly without creating gridlock on the very roads everyone is trying to keep clear. Many large festivals solve this with deep pit toilets, essentially large excavated trenches topped with rows of seats, engineered to hold an entire festival's worth of waste without needing to be emptied mid-event. It's not glamorous, but it's remarkably efficient. Dig once before the event, seal and refill once after, and avoid the logistical nightmare of constant truck traffic during the festival itself. Utilities present their own puzzle. A festival site usually has no infrastructure capable of supporting a sudden population the size of a mid-sized city. Water demand alone can spike to many times the normal daily usage of surrounding area, which creates a real risk. If a festival drains a local water system, nearby residents lose water pressure, and angry neighbors translate directly into political pressure against the festival's operating permit. The smart long-term fix many established festivals adopt is building dedicated underground reservoirs that get slowly filled in the weeks leading up to the event, so the surge in demand never actually touches the local system. Power follows a similar logic. Rather than every vendor and stage running its own generator, Festivals typically contract specialized companies to build a temporary electrical grid, combining large generators with renewable sources, distributing power the way a city's utility company would, just for a few weeks instead of forever. Vendors are their own logistical universe. A major festival might host hundreds of food stalls, merchandise booths, and charity tents. And from the festival perspective, every one of them is a potential liability if something goes wrong. A fire, a food safety violation, an unsafe structure. That's why vendors typically face an extensive application and approval process months in advance, submitting documentation covering insurance, health and safety compliance, staffing plans, and exact site layouts. Selection isn't just about filling slots. Festival organizers are curating an experience, balancing food variety, price points, and even the placement of vendors relative to stages and crowd flow. Spots near the main stages command premium fees, often into the tens of thousands of dollars for a multi-day run, while quieter corners of the site cost considerably less. Once the festival is running, keeping vendor stock becomes its own daily operation. Many festivals run an internal wholesale market, essentially a supply depot within the festival grounds where vendors can restock ingredients, packaging, and supplies without leaving the site or fighting through crowds. These restocking runs typically happen in early morning hours when foot traffic is lowest, with a tightly controlled window for delivery vehicles to move slowly through areas otherwise off limits to traffic. Vendor zones are also usually sealed off from general admission space entirely, functioning like fenced islands with their own access control, both for security and to protect the vendor's equipment and inventory overnight. All of this is overseen from a nerve center most attendees never see or even know exists, an operations or event control hub where security directors, infrastructure managers, site coordinators, and health and safety officers monitor the entire festival in real time. These hubs typically sit near on-site medical and fire services and stay in constant contact via radio and camera networks, with teams spread across every corner of the grounds. Their job isn't just to react to problems. It's to anticipate them, watching weather patterns, crowd density, and traffic flow well before any of it becomes a crisis. Area coordinators stationed throughout the site handle daily inspections and report back, creating a constant feedback loop between what's happening on the ground and what's being decided at the top. Security and crowd control raise their own deep complexities, especially around the question of exactly how many people are actually on site. Open-air festivals on rural land have a long history of uninvited guests sneaking in, and while that might sound harmless, it's a serious problem. Operating permits are usually tied to strict maximum capacity limits, and exceeding them can trigger fines or even threaten a festival's ability to operate at all in future years. The response from most major festivals has been a serious upgrade in perimeter security. Tall fencing engineered specifically to resist climbing, patrol routes, and monitoring towers, all designed not to be hostile, but to protect the festival's legal right to exist. That legal right is more fragile than most fans realize. A festival doesn't have any inherent entitlement to operate year after year. It survives entirely at the discretion of local government and the goodwill of its neighbors. Local councils impose extensive regulations covering everything from alcohol service rules to noise limits, and festivals that ignore them risk losing their licenses entirely. Curfews on stage volume are common, often shifting from full concert sound on the festival's biggest nights to a strict midnight cutoff as the event winds down, with officials sometimes patrolling the surrounding area with decibel meters to confirm compliance. Insurance is another invisible but enormous piece of the puzzle. Festivals are high-revenue businesses built on a tiny number of operating days, often just a long weekend, meaning nearly every major expense is paid up front regardless of whether the event actually happens as planned. If severe weather forces a cancellation or a headlining act drops out, the financial hit can be catastrophic without coverage. Because of this, large festivals typically carry substantial policies covering everything from general liability to event cancellation and non-appearance by artists. Only a small number of specialized insurers are willing to underwrite events at this scale, which gives those insurers significant influence over how festivals actually operate, dictating security staffing minimums, alcohol sales limits, and sometimes even input on which artists can be booked. Rising extreme weather patterns and a string of high-profile incidents across the live events industry in recent years have only pushed these premiums higher, making it increasingly difficult for new and proven festivals to get off the ground at all. Perhaps the most overlooked piece of festival logistics is the relationship with the people who live nearby year-round. A festival might exist for 5 days, but its neighbors live beside that field for the other 360. Long-running festivals that survive for decades tend to share one trait, a deliberate, ongoing effort to coexist with the surrounding community, rather than simply tolerate it. That can mean complimentary tickets for the closest residents, dedicated hotlines for noise or light complaints, designated parking for locals, and post-event cleanup commitments that extend for weeks before and after the festival itself, covering everything from litter on nearby roads to disruption at local transit stations. It's a quiet form of diplomacy that rarely makes headlines, but is often the difference between a festival's 10th anniversary and its last one. Finally, there's the matter of simply getting everyone there and back. Moving the population of a small city into rural land with limited infrastructure in a tight window without overwhelming local roads requires a transportation plan that rivals a small-scale military operation. Trains get supplemented with extra services. Shuttle buses run constant loops between stations and the site, and dedicated coach drop-off points keep large vehicles away from general traffic. For everyone driving in personally, festivals typically establish wide rings of traffic management, miles of designated routes where stopping isn't allowed, diversions to keep festival traffic off residential streets, and temporary road closures that funnel cars onto a small number of major routes rather than letting them spread across the whole region. When you step back and look at the entire system, the access roads, the temporary utilities, the vendor ecosystem, the security perimeter, the insurance negotiations, the community relations, the transportation web, it becomes clear that the music itself is almost the easiest part. Booking a lineup is, relatively speaking, simple compared to building the invisible infrastructure that allows hundreds of thousands of people to eat, sleep, move, and stay safe in a place that, just weeks earlier, was nothing but open land. That's the real magic trick of a major music festival. Not that the bands show up and play, but that an entire functioning city rises around them, holds together under enormous pressure, and then vanishes again, leaving the field looking almost like nothing happened at all.